The City Double Cash Card presents tips for cheering on your kids. Number 9, be supportive.
Hey, son, stay focused on everything I'm shouting.
You heard your father. Encouraging words filled with pressure.
Go get him. We love you, buddy. There it is.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone said what they meant? The City Double Cash Card does. It lets you earn double cash back with 1% when you buy and 1% as you pay. The City Double Cash Card. Double means double.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
It's me, Izzy Gutierrez, and Sarah Spain in for Dan Le Batard and Stugotz today. How's it going, Sarah?
Pretty all right. How about you?
Pretty all right. It's like extra medium.
Yes, exactly.
It's like very warm.
Not mediocre, but not great.
Not great. We do have the shipping container. Shipping container's pretty much full. We got Billy, Chris, Roy, Mike. Good to see you're handling everything okay.
I don't know about okay, but
okay.
Pretty all right.
Pretty all right.
We're pretty all right too.
Extremely decent.
You know, everybody's here except for Allison.
Except for Allison, who just stays away whenever Dan's not here because she feels free, right? Like she doesn't have to do everything someone says.
She lives in Tallahassee.
Oh, well, there's that. And the weather's terrible down here. Absolutely terrible down here.
Yeah, what's going on? You guys were all kind of running late because of a thunderstorm?
I mean, yes, it's called summer down here, and it gets really scary, though, when you start letting those thunderstorms fall over South Beach because the flooding is almost immediate. I was here last week on a Tuesday doing Around the Horn, and I was stuck on the beach for about 3 hours. Couldn't get out because the flooding was that bad.
So, because there's not, like, very good... there's not like sewers and stuff because it doesn't rain enough?
There's that, but also the world is changing and nobody's really going to do anything about it. And so this place is just going to sink.
Right, it's all going to sink.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I just remember when I lived in L.A., sometimes if there was a ton of rain, the street would flood because they just didn't have sewers the same way as other places where there's more precipitation or snow or rain.
I will say, Miami's not like Los Angeles. When Los Angeles says there's a ton of rain, it's actually sprinkling, and everyone forgets how to drive.
Yeah, exactly.
People can drive in the rain here, but today was especially bad, and for whatever reason, traffic was not cooperating, and everybody was in traffic for about 80 to 90 minutes.
Yep, about 100 minutes for me, but I live a little farther north than the guys in the container here. But speaking of Miami, Sarah, you being out in Chicago, you and I have now a football connection. And,
yes.
You know, given that, people complain a lot, we talk about the NBA during the offseason, we'll start with some football here. And, of course, we'll start here with your new quarterback. Give me his name. It's Mitch Trubisky, right?
Yes,
how do you pronounce it? Trubisky.
Mitchell Trubisky, yes.
Okay, Mitch Trubisky. And, of course, we're going to start with Mitch Trubisky's opinion on Michael Jordan versus LeBron James.
Yes. This was a bad move by Mitch Trubisky. He's got a lot to prove here in the city. Didn't come from a big name school, didn't play a ton, doesn't have a lot on his resume. We were all sort of surprised when Ryan Pace decided to move up to take him. And he will be behind Mike Glennon until he proves otherwise. But beyond that, if you're a quarterback in Chicago that has not yet proven to be terrible, you have a lot of goodwill on your side, right? So all he needs to do is coast and not be terrible, and people will love him here. And then he goes on the radio, and they ask him, here on a local station in Chicago, Spiegel and Parkin Show, they ask him LeBron or Jordan. Now remind this kid that he is in Chicago, and he's a North Carolina alum.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he says, I grew up watching LeBron. I didn't get to see Jordan in person. I'll take LeBron.
Here was the full quote. He said, LeBron, can I say that? He said, I think you're the first person to ask me that. I'm from Ohio. It's kind of biased. I grew up watching LeBron. That's really all I know. I didn't get to see Jordan in person. I did go to the same school as him, so that's kind of where we get wishy-washy there. I'm a big fan of both. I appreciate greatness. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so at the end, he there tried to save himself with the, I'm just now realizing as I'm talking and getting to the end of the sentence that I've made a grave error.
Yes. There's two things about that made me laugh. One, that right there would have been the most interesting thing Jay Cutler said during his entire Chicago tenure, by far.
True.
And two, man, how old do you feel when someone says, I grew up watching LeBron? Like, the dude is still playing. He's still in his prime. And this guy's a quarterback in the NFL, and he grew up watching LeBron, I feel like a 90-year-old.
It makes me feel old, except for I'm used to it, because I feel like when people try to make the Kobe or LeBron argument, I always ask them first, well, did you watch Jordan at all, like, regularly? Or do you just know of him from hearing about how great he was? Because that makes a huge difference. And that's what older people say to Jordan stands. Like, did you ever watch Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell or any of the greats before? Like, we're always going to be, people who are drawn to whatever we're nostalgic about and to whatever we experienced in real time. So I don't begrudge him that. But I will say, if you're going to go to UNC, shouldn't you, by virtue of that, be surrounded by enough Jordan paraphernalia and love for MJ and history that you seek it out and then you decide that there's an allegiance to that?
He said he's not one to really study it and debate it the way other people on TV and radio do. But you went to North Carolina. He was there for, at least 3 years, right? Like, there got to be highlights just playing in a hallway that you walk through when you go work out.
And you have to just know you're in Chicago. That would be like showing up and them saying, deep dish or thin crust. And then be like, deep dish? That's not real pizza. What?
That's some clutch.
Terrible take, dude.
Midnight in Chicago the other day.
Nice.
It does
Look at you. Look at you carving up. Somebody had a couple drinks if he was eating late night deep dish.
There's no rules. There's no rules when you're on a trip.
There's no rules on Lollapalooza weekend.
I was curious, though, when it came to Jay Cutler here, because that's the connection, right? Like, he's down here now. You had him for a while. I'm not really that down on Jay Cutler in general. Like, I think Jay Cutler's a guy, he's one of those classic old school quarterbacks that if you get him some protection on a regular basis, that guy's going to play pretty well for you. Now, he's got to be in shape and he's got to care a little bit, and I don't know if he does or doesn't. But to you, when you look back on his tenure in Chicago, like, what were the primary signs to you that say, all right, his body language actually does translate into the type of person, player, teammate he is? Because, I mean, we assign that stuff to a lot of people, and it ends up not being true. But it feels like everybody's saying it is true with Jay because the body language is so strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to deal with that forever, everywhere he goes, because he doesn't care about what you think. He cares about football. By all accounts, his teammates in Chicago said he was one of the first in and one of the last to leave, that he's incredibly tough. He plays through injury. He's very dedicated to being good at what he does. He just doesn't care if you think that he's enthusiastic or interested or a good teammate or a great leader. He doesn't care about endorsements. He doesn't care about charming you. The ways that anybody else in a position like that would think to themselves, I can make life easier on myself? Just fake it. Just fake being enthusiastic, say what people want me to say, and make it easier on myself. He will not do that. He refuses to do that.
Well, Dan Marino didn't fake it very well either, but he just also didn't come with the same level of I don't care that just, shoots through his eyes at Jay Cutler's.
If his usual resting face and way of being wasn't as bad as Cutler's usual resting face and way of being. That's the problem for Jay. And I think, here in Chicago, he would do the Waddle and Sylvie show once a week. And there were the days when he would have 3 picks the day before and have zero interest in contributing, and it would be pulling teeth for the guys trying to get an hour show out of him. But most days, he was really funny and sarcastic and very open. I like to tell the example because it's funny to me. He would talk about how Kristen Cavallari gets psychics for their dogs and then would tell them what their dogs wanted and were thinking. He was really able to let loose with those two guys because he was very comfortable around them. When he's not comfortable, when he doesn't know you or care to know you, he is not a friendly person at all. And so I've always thought, and this is speaking out of turn, and I should get the reckless speculation sound probably, but I've always thought from afar that he might have some sort of social anxiety because, like I said, when he's around people that he's comfortable with, he's really funny and sarcastic and quick-witted, and when he doesn't want to talk to you or doesn't want to be around people, he is as bitter beer face as you can be. And I don't think that's just a choice. I think he would just rather show up and play football and never have to interact with anyone else. But you can't. You gotta be a teammate and a leader. And I think as much as his play on the field has allowed him to have a career as long as it has, he would be a million times better player if he were able to be a better connector to his teammates.
I obviously don't know if that's true or not, but I could understand that theory of yours. But real quick, Mike, when you heard Jay Cutler, I'm just talking football reasons, football assessment here. Did you think, because I honestly forgot he was out there and quote unquote available. Did you think, yeah, that's a better option football-wise than Colin Kaepernick? Because I did.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It made all the sense in the world. This is the perfect situation for Jay Cutler, obviously Adam Gase.
Right.
And I think it's going to work out for Jay Cutler because I think this is the first time in his career he doesn't have these huge expectations, and everyone sort of knows who he is. They're not trying to change him. Right. They're in on this whole Jay Cutler experience. And people are rude down here too.
Yeah.
We're not chummy. We
they kind of like that down here.
We dig the vibe.
I've always thought if he was, quote unquote, our jerk quarterback down here, that they'd love him.
We dig
but do you think that if he plays, if I understand what you're saying, in Chicago, it took forever for people to stop trying to change him and just accept him for what he was and take the good with the bad. But do you think part of that is just that Miami is in a really tough situation? If Tannehill is going to be injured and they're not going to have him, then they're like, this is okay then. So we don't expect that much because we realize that we're desperate. Because I feel like the responses to his first couple practices have been exactly the same as the start of every season and everywhere he goes, where it starts out with every beat reporter being like, look at the arm on this guy. Wow. Like, it doesn't look like he's taking a day off. This guy can fire it from anywhere. And that's always been the story with him. It doesn't matter when he's got that arm as long as he's got that brain. And that doesn't mean he's not smart. He's very smart. He makes terrible decisions. So I understand what you're saying, Mike. Expectations are not that high. Everybody knows who this guy is by now. But if he comes out and is making terrible game-breaking picks, I don't think he's going to be any more liked there than anywhere else.
My prediction, real quick, if he gets plenty of time, if he doesn't have to run a lot, they're not going to miss Tannehill at all. He's a better passer. Don't hold me to that. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance.
It's going to be interesting for you guys. This optimism is funny to me.
Don Le Batard.
Oscar Robinson had 41 triple-doubles back in 61-62. 41.
Stugotz.
It's Robertson, but... Okay, but...
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Sarah, the other day I was sort of talking about this with somebody. I think it was might have been you, actually, before we started a show when we were talking about when the last time you remember an NBA player getting suspension for a marijuana positive test, and I guess we were relating it to the NFL and their potential softening on that stance. But this news from, I guess it's out of the NBA. I'm not sure what city. Sacramento Kings big man Zach Randolph was arrested on a felony charge of marijuana possession with intent to sell by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Wednesday night, according to police reports. The arrest was part of a disturbance that resulted in damage to 5 LAPD vehicles and 1 sheriff's vehicle, according to ABC7 in Los Angeles. LAPD officials told ABC7 that officers were on routine patrol when they encountered a group blocking the street, drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, and playing loud music. The officers then tried to disperse the crowd, and the disturbance escalated. There's a way to get around tests, apparently. Probably not a good idea to get busted with it and then have this charge on you. Not much you can get away with after that, right?
Very true. Very true.
So you still wanted to discuss this Jay Cutler thing. He was what in Chicago? Was he did he underachieve? Was he underappreciated, or was he sort of over-scrutinized? How did you see that?
I think he both underachieved and was misunderstood. I think his potential because of his physical gifts is enormous, but at this point we've seen enough of him to know that it's never going to be met with an equal part football brain. He's just not a good decision maker under pressure. We saw him have his best success under Mike Martz and under Adam Gase, and both of those offenses and systems were ones where he wasn't allowed to audible, where they kept it simple, a lot of checkdowns, a lot of, quick reads, not a lot of deep passing. And so what happens is he gets in, people come in, and he had different offensive coordinators nearly every year. They come in, they see the arm, they see the physical gifts, and their mind explodes with all the opportunity that they have with this guy. And because he can make those throws, doesn't necessarily mean he makes them at the right time and in the right instances. He throws into double coverage all the time. He makes bad decisions in the red zone. He makes bad decisions late in games. He's not willing to throw it away when he needs to. So there were times in Chicago when he didn't have enough weapons and he didn't have a good offensive line and it wasn't a good system. And so that held him back. But those moments when he did have the right pieces in place, he was good. Getting them to NFC championship level, good. I just think the misunderstanding stems from his complete disinterest in whether people like him or think he's a hard worker or think he cares. And so that is going to lead to accusations of not being tough, of him quitting on the team, all that stuff. So people are yelling at me for telling him to fake it. I'm not saying he has to fake it. I'm saying his life would be easier if he feigned a bit more enthusiasm, and he wouldn't get hit so much with accusations of not caring if he acted like people expect him to.
I think if he doesn't care, then his life is easy. Because if he does,
Right. But I mean, I think part of the criticism of him as a football player stems also from criticism of him as a leader and as a teammate and bitter beer face and all that. There would be less of that and more focus on the football if he just was slightly more enthusiastic and seemed slightly less miserable all the time. That's his prerogative, though. If he doesn't care, he doesn't care. I'm just kind of interested in, because I know Mike Ryan said nobody has any expectations for him there, which is a great start for him, about whether people believe that this is going to be a season saved because of him, what they think. I'm curious the insight from Miami people about, are there players on the team that you think are going to butt heads or maybe are not going to be the best fit for him?
I haven't been able to take the temperature of the fans down here at all. I've been in and out of town a little bit. And frankly, I feel like just reading the Twitter responses, it's all just people lining up for the right joke. But I don't know if really, really down here people are like, maybe.
A lot of people down here are here for the jokes.
Yeah.
It might be an indictment on Ryan Tannehill, but usually when you lose your starting quarterback in camp, your season's wrecked. You know that you're in for a high draft pick the following year. But when Cutler came across, I feel like everybody's expectations are sort of the same. This was a team that made the playoffs last year, a team that's apparently on the rise. I mean, you're supposed to be on the rise if you make a surprise playoff appearance the previous season. And I believe the same expectations are in place today, even though Jay Cutler's behind the wheel.
And that's partly because you guys never really had complete faith in Tannehill, yes?
Like I said, yes. I believe it's probably a greater indictment on Ryan Tannehill, even though the town sort of came around on him, especially after he wasn't playing in that playoff game and they saw what they had in an older Matt Moore. I think people are excited about Jay Cutler because not so much what he can do on the field. He's a proven quarterback. You sort of know what you're getting with Jay Cutler for the good and the bad.
Right.
And I think that's a good way to approach this. It's a good perspective to have with Jay Cutler. And for the first time in his career, no one's hoping to change him. They're fine if they get the Jay Cutler they've always seen. Now, if they're fine when he throws in a pick six in a crucial playoff game, no.
At least they got to the playoffs.
At least they got to the playoffs. Right. Or if it's in a big moment when they're battling for a playoff spot, that's always going to blow back on the quarterback, no matter how well they're liked.
I'm with Sarah on the idea of expectations with Cutler, because with Tannehill, if you'd have come into last year with no expectations, he would have had a phenomenal season. If you would have come into this year with no expectations, I would be excited about what he could produce. But when you put him in this position where it's a playoff team, you're supposed to get better now. You're, as a quarterback, supposed to make that leap. Zero faith in him. Zero faith because the passes haven't gotten more accurate, his reads haven't gotten better, etc. So, again, it comes down to the offensive line. You give this guy some time, I think he'll be better. But what does that mean for the whole team? I don't know, because I don't know if that offensive line can be that good. But, man, I feel bad for Matt Moore. When I read, not necessarily the Jay Cutler, because I mean Jay Cutler's got like a classic arm. He's when he can be really good, he can be good. But when they were discussing potentially bringing in Tim Tebow, even as an Adam Gase guy, I'm like, man,
how real was that? Obviously, if they were discussing bringing in Tim Tebow, it's probably because they just needed another arm. I don't think they were seriously considering.
Right, he doesn't even have an arm.
Matt Moore would have been the starter. Yeah, Matt Moore would have been the starter there, and I presume Tebow would have been the guy to come in and just do some reps in practice. But yeah, you feel bad for the guy. He's finally set up to get his real chance and immediately replaced. I think the ultimate troll job that would destroy the hearts of Chicago fans would be for him to show up in Miami.
Out of 5 to a degree where ultimately you don't have to worry about this. You don't sit up there and blemish the league. You don't blemish your future employer. You don't blemish yourself because you can't control and discipline yourself when you know what the damn law is. I'm not saying that it's right. I get your point about alcohol and weed. I get all of that. I understand it. You don't hear me saying anything about Snoop Dogg. You don't hear me saying anything about a whole bunch, an abundance of rap artists and other musicians and actors and actresses. You know why? Because it ain't costing them their money. The issue to me is not weed. It's the fact that the weed ain't worth the dollars it costs you. And if you stupid enough to put yourself in that position, excuse me? Excuse me? What?
I don't know. What do you think this? What do you think this will actually cost Zach Randolph?
I'm just saying that you never know potentially because again, you can get fined by the league.
He's already made $180 million.
Oh, the Sacramento King. That happens.
Hey, buddy, the wait is over. It's the 2017 Suey Awards, starting August 21st. The Suey Awards. Don Batard.
I just looked over my shoulder where Max and Stephen A. were talking to Snoop Dogg about whether or not LeBron is top 5 all time. Get the hell out of here.
Stugotz.
Who's responsible? Is that you, Salatoro? Who's responsible for that at ESPN? Because that person needs to be punished publicly. Brofsky, is that you? Roberts, bald guy in sales. Who did that? You waste his time with is LeBron top 5 all time. I hate you.
This is the Don Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
I'm curious to know something because I didn't, like I said, haven't really been paying too much attention to sports pop culture when I'm out of town. So when did Beyonce have these children? Like, did she wait to announce it until she was, like, totally thin and took some dope pictures? Or was it, like, right away? And I don't even, like, first thing I saw was a picture of her holding twins, and I'm like, how old are they? They've been out for a while.
Yeah, she announced it way back. I mean, I think the first photos were, like, mid-July.
Okay.
But she announced their arrival, or somebody announced their arrival.
Because I saw pictures today of her at some event, and she does not look like she's been pregnant.
Yeah, she looks bomb.
I mean, she looks amazing. Not that I'm surprised whatsoever.
Izzy, I'm a little confused. Yeah. Did you just find out Beyonce was even pregnant?
Not just find out. No. I knew she was pregnant. I just didn't know she'd had the. I felt like she announced her pregnancy like 4 months ago. Like I felt like there's no way it should come. The children should come anytime soon. And then I saw that one picture of her holding twins, and I'm like, how old are they? Like, what did I miss here? Or is this the announcement? Or is she really sneaky and doesn't, gets around media and has kids without anybody noticing?
No, she's not sneaky. Everybody noticed except for you. She does look amazing because she's the queen bee. And the babies are a month or so old now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she's rocking that mom bod, like the hot mom bod with the extra big boobies.
She's the most impressive woman out there. And
she's going to buy the Rockets, and it's going to be amazing. And you're going to ask for that as every single assignment that you get for sidelines.
I might move to Houston. I mean, if she buys the Rockets, like my goal in life is to just be friends. Like just hang out one time. Like,
I was texting Mark Cuban about whether if she became the part owner in the NBA, would he no longer be the coolest owner? And I know that JT has a little bit of stake in the Grizzlies, and there's a couple other celebrities, but she would be a big, huge name. And then we were kind of going back and forth, and I asked, he said something about he could teach her about being an owner. And I said, oh, you don't think she can learn from Jay-Z from his brief time with the Nets? And he's like, did you see what the Nets did under Jay-Z? And I was like, oh, shade. So I think he would be down to have some more celebrities in the NBA ownership mix.
I feel like that was just a name drop.
You don't think it's funny that he clowned Jay-Z's ownership tenure with the Nets?
I mean, it was an excuse for you to mention that you've been texting with Mark Cuban.
Pretty much.
I don't really need to do that. Everybody knows, and I've established that I have a
I like that he's still cool with you, even though you criticize him every chance you get.
Who's that?
Cuban.
I don't criticize him every chance I get.
My memory does not serve me right then.
What have I criticized him over?
I don't want to ruin your friendship.
Okay.
That way you can name drop him a little bit more.
I don't remember criticizing him, but I'm sure I've been critical when necessary.
We'll get back there. And speaking of NBA, I do want to discuss the NBA rest situation again after they made a lot of changes to the schedule. I feel like a lot of us sort of jumped on it yesterday and probably didn't give the NBA its fair share of credit for doing something that is important for its players, but we'll get into that a little bit later. I mentioned earlier that we're going to have Dave Zirin of The Nation on, and we are going to discuss with him some of the comments Josh Rosen, UCLA quarterback, made. Among other things, he said football and school don't go together. He said they just don't. Trying to do both is like trying to do 2 full-time jobs. There are guys who have no business being in school, but they're here because this is the path to the NFL. There's no other way. I think a lot of people, a lot of, members of the media in the sports media today sort of agreed with him. We've been on this angle for a while now that it's just too much for these players, blah, 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 especially the football players. But there's been some sort of some bite back. There's been some blowback, right, with Josh, especially, or towards Josh, especially from a handful of media members, Sarah?
Yeah, I think a lot of people responded with the wanting to have an honest conversation about whether there should just be a minor leagues for NFL, the same way that there are for MLB, because the expectation that there's an actual school experience for some of these football players is kind of false. Whether that's because they're pushed into majors and classes that are the easiest to schedule around football, or just the idea of trying to balance a real work schedule alongside studying and everything else. But there's plenty of people, Danny Cannell, Will Kane, who argue that there's tons of student athletes that do it and have always done it. Dan Orlovsky criticized Rosen, said he was entitled. So I think there's 2 sides, and it's interesting to see who lines up to say, yeah, let's have an honest conversation about whether this is a realistic expectation of these kids to be making billions of dollars for schools, and to not really get the school experience that people say is the trade-off. And then there's plenty who, and being a Division I athlete myself, I think some people who are speaking from the perspective of being an athlete but not a football player at a big name program maybe are trying to compare apples and oranges.
So what are some of the complaints specifically? If you need time to look it up, take your time. But because you start to listen to what Rosen is saying here, and he says no one in their right mind should have a football player schedule and go to school. It's not that some players shouldn't be in school. It's just that universities should help more instead of just finding ways to keep them eligible. Anytime any player puts into school will take away from the time they could put into football. They don't realize that they're getting screwed until it's too late. You have a bunch of people at the universities who are supposed to help you out, and they're more interested in helping you stay eligible. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who went to Kentucky, who basically had athlete friends and saw a lot of the sort of tutoring sessions, and he said, well, it depends on which one you went to. If you went to the one that was, I forget the name of it, but it was the tutor would write the problem on the board. It would be the exact problem that you're supposed to figure out, and they'd do it, and you just kind of do it along and say, trust me, that's the answer. Or they'd say, hey, when you get this test, this is going to be the question, this is going to be your answer. And so they do just kind of help you move along. They don't necessarily help you with your actual academics sometimes. And so there's that anger there that, okay, you're saying you're complaining so much, but you get all this help. But are you really getting help, or are you just getting help skating by?
Right, and if you look at some of the controversies in different schools where players have, other people have taken their SATs, or other people have, the UNC study about the number of athletes at one point that couldn't read. I mean, it was really, it's incredible, some of the stories that come out about the education that I'm putting in quotation marks that athletes are getting. Now, that's not the case everywhere or for every athlete. So Will Kane is one of the people that disagrees with Rosen, and he says that his point ignores all other athletes and students that have to work through school, who also have to juggle time management and class scheduling, that there's plenty of people who work 30 hours a week, have families, raise kids, and go to college. I think that Rosen's statement is not ignoring those people, but to compare somebody who works at Starbucks on the side and then also studies is an incredibly different thing than somebody who is practicing 2 hours, film study for another hour, mandatory study hall, mandatory nutrition, whatever it is. Like the schedule that some of these kids have, that's 4 to 5 hours a day for football, right smack in the middle of the day. You can't take this class because it's never scheduled when you're outside of football, or you have these physical demands and travel demands and the amount of money and pressure put on you. That's very different than just having a job.
I'd like to hear from maybe some collegiate athletes who either currently or have played football specifically for a big program. If you want to tweet at Le Batard Show, at Sarah Spain, at Iz Gutierrez, and let us know what the difference is specifically. Because when we're talking about working 30 hours and raising kids, yada, yada, that's fine. The schedule specifically for these athletes can't really be altered that much. It has to go around the football schedule, and then you have to hope that what you have available to you is what you need for your education. And a lot of times it really isn't, and you've got to make concessions. And then, what are you doing there? You're obviously choosing football over academics, which is what they say they don't want you to do. But we'll stay here and get into this a little deeper in just a second.
Don Le Batard.
Deion Sanders is the best to ever do it. I think we've talked to you before briefly. I don't know how. At one point, you had gone public saying you had a sex addiction, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Stugotz.
No, that wasn't me. That was another guy. Ain't no sex addiction. I love sex just as much as you love sex. Ain't no addiction. I'm a sexaholic or something. You try to get a confession out of me.
I feel like I've talked to you about that before.
No, that wasn't me. That was the other Sanders. That wasn't me. That wasn't me.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Sarah, speaking of college education, do you ever you follow this Twitter account called You Had One Job?
Yes, of course.
A funny one popped up today. It's a children's book, the number 5 on the right, and on the left it says 5 bananas, and of course there are 6 bananas in the picture.
Oh, no.
Just ruining our kids' minds. So you were saying before, I was mentioning the Josh Rosen thing, a lot of the issue that you can't really compare everyday life necessarily to, a person with a full-time job and kids, or 2 full-time jobs and kids, is the schedule and how difficult it is to find what it is you want to do in academics while still finding those classes, attending those classes, and still being the football player who shows up at all practices and games, because that is not non-negotiable. That makes it different than quote-unquote everyday life. But you were going to add to that?
Yeah, I was also just going to say, part of the difference here is that if you're someone sent us a story and said, you should talk about Myron Rolle. He was a Rhodes Scholar and a neurosurgeon and an NFL player. It's not about the outliers. It's about the average football playing kid. And the only way to get to the NFL is through college football. Now you could play Division II or Division III and try to get a spot by, showing up at a camp and getting a workout. You could try to play at a lower level that has fewer expectations and fewer demands if you think you're talented enough to still make the NFL out of that smaller pool. But in the end, I think we all know that by far the best and most efficient way to get to the NFL if you're a football player who wants to go pro is to go to a big name program in college football. You don't have any other options. You can't even do what the NBA does, where you can go abroad for a year and come back. You have to have, I think it's at least 2 years, and there are no minor leagues for football. So if you're an average to poor student and you want to play in the NFL, you have to go to college, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's not really a choice that you're given. It's not like, so Jason Fitz and I had been hosting together while you were out, and he said, listen, most colleges have music performance majors, not music theory, not music as a music history, music performance. You are a violinist and your major is performing the violin. Now, in accordance with that major, you have, other classes that teach you how you would be a professional performer. But you could do the same thing with football or a sport. Major in football and take classes in watching tape, coaching, getting an agent, managing money, all those things that you would need. It's very different than expecting a kid to do all the things that they need to do and also major in econ or whatever.
I wonder who has to say it and who has to say it how for it to really create any sort of change here in terms of what the responsibilities are specifically, again, for football players, because last year, Cardell Jones, or last year, 2 years ago, whatever it was, said something very similar. He just didn't say it as sort of as thoughtfully and as thoroughly as Josh Rosen here did. But when it gets down to the players themselves and they're telling you, look, this is too hard for us, even, we're not a bunch of dummies. We can handle school. There's literally not just enough time in the day for us to do all these things. You have to recognize that it's realistic. Again, we'll talk to Dave Zirin of The Nation on this subject a little later.
Hi, everyone. Stugotz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you are confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you the same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you are getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz. That's rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz, STUGOTZ. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states. NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Epix presents the new original series, Get Shorty.
You asked me to make a movie with cash.
That a problem?
It's perfect, isn't it?
You're only as good as your next hit. Chris O'Dowd and Ray Romano. Get Shorty. Premieres Sunday, 10/9 Central on Epix.
Dan Le Batard.
Gone with the Wind was 4 hours long?
4 hours too long.
Really? Gone with the Wind is overrated?
It is overrated.
Okay, very good.
Doesn't hold up.
Stugotz.
I mean, how long does it take for something to blow away?
I do love how happy that makes you when you get the Hakeem Nicks laugh.
The highest honor.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance, comparing rates to help you save. Now that's Progressive. Call or click today and find out how much Progressive could save you. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And now your SportsCenter update. The NHL's Dallas Stars have become the first Texas professional sports franchise to officially oppose a bathroom bill targeting transgender people. Team president James Lights said in a statement Wednesday that the Stars are strongly opposed to any legislation perceived as discriminatory. UFC star George St. Pierre posted a photo to social media on Wednesday saying he signed his contract to face Michael Bisping on November 4th in New York. Sweet. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. Sarah, this is Mike Ryan's mockery, that rejoin right there.
I already heard when he was in town. I was asking whether you guys were hanging out, and he said, well, I'm seeing him when he's not at terrible stages. He always goes to the terrible stages.
Man, if Dan were there in Chicago at Lollapalooza, Mike's pockets would be empty with the amount of fines he would have faced, given his commentary. I'll be honest. Like, it's obvious. Like, you're talking about a concert-going newbie, a music appreciation newbie, if you will. Not really in that respect, because Mike's just different in terms of, okay, let's put it this way, a live music appreciation newbie.
Yes, we'll remind people that when you and I started, right, when you and I started hosting together about a year ago, I talked about live music, and you said you'd only gone to 3 concerts in your life, and I was taken aback. I told you to reassess your priorities, to find your inner soul and get life, on board.
Basically.
Yes, get a hold of your life, and you have established yourself as a live music going person now, and I appreciate.
Mike would argue that I have not actually seen music. I've only seen noises.
You've
just
seen
and a bunch
DJs.
of crazy people.
Just seen tiki music.
Tiki. Here's what I'll say.
I call
about
it
that.
Music.
Well, it's funny to me because. Okay, so we're going for different reasons. Like, I'm going with a group of 6, 7 people, 8 people. I'm just going to have fun, whatever. I'm not going to assess the music necessarily. I am in just, an idea of just hanging out, having a good time. Now, I appreciate good acts. Like, don't get me wrong. But if I'm going to a really, really good act, like, A, I've got to convince everybody to come with me because it's best when you're in a group. And B, I've got to know some of the music. Like, some of it. Not all of it, some of it. And so it's funny when Mike and I were discussing certain things, like I told him somebody I saw, and he's like, who's that? Like, it sounded like I made up a name for a DJ, he said, and I started going through the list of
There was a DJ called DJ Who.
DJ Who.
DJ Who, San Holo.
Slushy.
San Holo? Come on.
Yeah, like Han
It's probably
Solo,
San
but-
Holo.
It's San Holo. But even his wife was like, yeah, he's basically judging you so hard right now. And I was like, yeah, I know.
No, I understand how it is with a group. You have to do what the group wants. I get it. I've been there. You don't have bad taste
But
in
that's
music. You
also
just have
Izzy's
bad taste in
taste.
friends.
No, that's Izzy's taste. He went to Electric Daisy Music Festival in Vegas. That's all uns. Did you just hiccup?
No, I'm still laughing at my bad taste in friends.
I thought you just bomanied.
comment. It is funny, though. Like, all right, they're a little younger than me, but we have a lot of similarities. And it is.
You like to wear onesies to concerts in the middle of summer.
One of the onesies broke.
I heard about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did you hear about
just-
the person that took a picture with him because he looked like Obama? Not because he recognized him from TV.
That's not the first
he
time that's
approached him.
happened.
Hey, oh man, my dad loves, and you'd think the NBA.
No. This
your
is the first thing.
sideline.
This is the first thing you said, Mike, and this is where I was ready for it. Like I've seen it. I've heard this a million times. Hey, has anybody ever told you look like?
Yeah, Obama.
And then I'm just like, okay, which corny joke should I come up with now? And it's Obama, and I was like, oh, it's one of these because that's happened to me a few times.
His way of getting a picture with you was, my dad loves Obama, man. Let's take pictures.
That's so random.
And Mike thought that was hilarious, so he took a picture of us taking a picture and then snapped it or Instagram or story. I don't know, what was it, a story? And that was pretty funny. But I Mike said something to the effect of, I never feel older than I'm on when I'm at this one stage, which is where they play all the EDM stuff. And what I sort of started to realize was, man, it could be obnoxious. Like, there are some just drugged out kids out there.
They're little kids, man.
And they're little, and like there's bottles being thrown across the crowd because, that's cool. And it does get super, super duper obnoxious in that respect. But if you can avoid that nonsense, it's still a lot of fun.
You can avoid that nonsense by going to the right stages and seeing the right acts.
Yeah, but I feel like it's now like the current day, like headbanging music, right? Like that's
EDM,
crazy.
yeah.
It's crazy. Mosh
I think
pits,
so.
there's people
That's
leaving
it's
bleeding.
basically the hair metal scene of the late '80s.
So it's not
of today. Yeah. I mean,
it's
I
not
think
something I'm going to stay with forever. I'm just telling you now, having fun.
Yeah, I mean, I like that Izzy is undergoing a, I don't know, I guess midlife crisis is.
It's more of a rediscovery.
It's a rediscovery. It's a rediscovery. I don't want to be so harsh
however
with
you
him.
want to brand it. I just like that you waited until you hit 40 to go to Vegas for the first time, and then went to Electric Daisy Carnival, which is like 20-year-olds. Music clubbing, and then came to Lollapalooza and wore onesies. And by the way, Around the Horn posted a touching tale of Izzy talking about managing to make it through, even though the zipper on his onesie broke, and he was devastated, but he managed to get by. And they posted it on Twitter if you're interested in that heart-wrenching tale. I like it for you. I'm not judging in any way. It is just such a stereotypical sort of, you hit 40 and then you're like, what have I done with my life? I must party all the time.
Yeah.
What have I been doing? I wasted all this time being, serious. Now I'm going to start wearing onesies and going to DJ sets.
Oh, don't think I don't see that. Like, don't think I don't see how obvious it is from outside looking in that it's just like, oh, wow, what's next? Like the crazy sports car, which is not going to happen.
Ooh, that's coming.
No, he already
that's
had
coming
that.
for sure.
He already had
I've
it.
never had that. I've never had the crazy sports car. I've driven Hondas my whole life. But
Did you have a Miata? I think the first time I met you were driving around a Miata.
No, never had a Mazda Miata, and I've never driven a Mazda
Go
Miata.
with the joke.
Yeah, Izzy, play along.
No, I know. But it's just, it does, from the outside looking in, it feels that way. It looks that way, but it doesn't feel that way to me. So, I mean,
It doesn't feel that way to me either. On the surface, what Sarah said. Look, perception is reality. To a lot of people, finding out that you're a 40-year-old going to your first EDM concerts and you're wearing onesies, they're going to say, midlife crisis. But to people that know you, this is different.
I've always been willing to just put myself out there a little bit.
Right.
It's just a matter of, what the right setting is and who I'm with and whatnot. So that part's not the problem.
Well, and also, admittedly, you just went through a major life change. You were with your ex for 8 years?
Yep.
8 years. I mean, when you get out of a long-term relationship like that and it doesn't work out, like, you are going to go do a bunch of stuff that you maybe stuff that he didn't like that you always were into but you didn't do together. Or maybe just like, I don't know, go out and rage a little bit because it's been a tough time. That's totally understandable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of levels to it. I'm not going to bore everybody with it. But where I think the snobbery of Mike Ryan came through the thickest was after the Chance the Rapper set. the next morning.
One of the most populated sets in the history of Lollapalooza, I heard.
Yeah, I've never seen a crazier, larger crowd.
People dig Chance around here.
It was an amazing crowd. As far as I was concerned, I think the people around Mike probably weren't having as much fun. I left that thinking that was essentially his victory lap. He did a great job with it. Of course, it's going to be some sort of self-congratulatory elements to it, right? But I thought it was really good. I thought he moved it along. I thought he did not bring out a bigger name than himself because, again, it was him pointing out that he is the primary act now. He's the headliner, and I thought it was really good. And, I don't know Chance's music like that. I'm not singing along to every song. I know most of the popular ones, the ones released, whatnot, and a handful of others. But people around me singing a ton of the songs word for word. The Chicagoans around me were loving it, and it was a great vibe.
It's a big Chicago thing.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily understand the rise because it's so heavily influenced by gospel music, and that's not necessarily what you think goes hand in hand with popularity.
But I felt like I got that as a result of the show. You know what I mean? I didn't get it going in, but seeing it, I understand it a lot better.
He has a handful
So, Mike,
of
you just
songs
didn't
that
think it was a great performance?
I was confused by all of it. I was confused by I understand he's from Chicago. I didn't understand why we were taking such a huge victory lap and how Michelle Obama's congratulating him, and it seemed like a Kanye show. And part of me is like, let's relax a little.
But don't
the
you
Obama
think that
thing is also a Chicago thing, though. I mean, you have to
and
think
also
about that.
Get it all, but Chance wouldn't be this big if he was from Phoenix. Okay?
But the way that he went
wouldn't be.
about finding his success, which involved refusing to sign to a major label, using mixtapes, allowing his music out freely.
Allegedly.
Oh, so this
Let's not
is where
act like
it's coming
Universal's
from.
behind this whole thing.
Okay, so
Fine
this is where it's
after
coming
fine
from.
after fine. You left Big Sean early. Big Sean would not shut up. One of your complaints about Chance is that he was Chance the Yapper.
Yeah.
Big Sean would not shut up.
You said it yourself. I left Big Sean.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, Sarah, the next day, me and the crew were talking about the show. The set, thought it was so good. Get a text from Mike in the middle of that conversation. How bad was Chance?
Oh,
woof. And I'm like, man,
Mike.
please tell me you're kidding. That's terrible.
Chance the Yapper.
Chance the Yapper. That was funny, though. I thought he was great. And Sarah, you would have thought he was great.
I'm sure I would have. I'm very supportive of Chance. I mean, he's a little quirky sometimes, a little different, and he does like to talk. But he probably listen. If you came from where he did, not in terms of neighborhood, but in terms of like relatively out of nowhere, and has gotten so big so fast, using mixtapes and not traditional methods. Why wouldn't he take a victory lap? He's taking the biggest crowd at Lollapalooza potentially in history as a hometown rapper who came up on mixtapes. That's awesome.
Totally understood. Great story. Good role model for children. Gives back to that community.
A ton.
I get all of that.
He just didn't love
He has a handful of really good songs. A couple. Most of his songs I don't think really connect, and he wouldn't be headlining if he was from Phoenix. That's all.
Hater.
I will say this.
All the music blogs are based out of Chicago, people.
Yeah.
All of them. And they're not saying a bad word about this guy.
Oh, Midwest bias. It's always been a problem.
They all sort of mentioned that he was talking too much and it was a victory lap. But it's okay because it's Chance. If he was from Phoenix, you wouldn't hear from him. You wouldn't hear of Chance the Rapper.
I will say I am going to listen very closely to Mike's suggestions from here on out because I regret my last set that I saw there, choosing Zed's Dead over Arcade Fire. What a mistake that was.
What
not
do you
that Zed's
do?
Dead was not good. It was great. It was fun. It was fun, but I just was listening to Arcade Fire on the way out, and I was like, wow. Hey, again, group decision, not 100% my decision.
Don't be a
but
sheep,
I regret
Izzy.
allowing that to happen.
Not
Don't
bad
be a
taste
sheep.
in music. Bad taste in friends.
Don Le Batard.
Who at the network made Ryan Russillo this NBA expert? Hey, seriously. Jeez. Russillo's condescending attitude. Oh, you agree with Stugotz. Therefore, it can't be right. Get out of here, Russillo.
Stugotz.
How many threes did you hit in high school? Because I have the Long Island record for 6 threes and a half of a high school game. What did you do in high school? Did you even play basketball? I played the game.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
More complaints from Mike. He thought that he only played about 20 seconds of this song here.
It's one of the 3 songs I went to hear.
And he had 4 versions of Blessings that he performed, I believe. That was another one of your complaints there.
Yes, I'm ready for my blessings. I'm ready for my miracle. I was ready 3 songs ago when he did the same chorus. Jesus.
The yapper. Hey, what do we feel? How do we feel about this? Because I feel like, yes, we're at a time where this is not a big deal whatsoever, but if we would have done this maybe 5 or 10 years ago, or 5, 6 years ago, it would have been kind of questionable. This is from Dan Ravel. The Miami Heat will announce today they'll be the first NBA team to allow entry into the arena through a mobile ticket only. No other way.
It seems like a lot of people already do that. My conflict with that is if your battery dies on the way in, if you lose your phone.
Yeah, one of the first comments was that, and Miami Heat responded with, we'll have charging solutions available.
So you sit and charge your phone and hope that you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That happened to me once, embarrassingly, at the airport. I was right when I started using mobile tickets to get on planes instead of printing them out. And I had it sitting there, and I was at work all day, just didn't really think about it. I was in this incredibly long security line, and my phone died. And so I had gotten up to the very front. I had to pull my laptop out of my bag and stand next to the people with my laptop on top of their podium and sit and wait for my phone to recharge so I could get onto the flight. So, I mean, it's not completely impossible to fix, but I think for the most part it's easy. I just don't understand why you force it.
Well,
Maybe
I mean,
you make
as of
the
last
line.
year, Jeff Van Gundy couldn't have gotten into a game with his flip phone and probably wouldn't have been able to get his ticket on there. And, you know,
and
it's
if your
Miami.
Wi-Fi's
There's a lot
down,
of...
right? What if your Wi-Fi's down and you haven't downloaded it yet? What if there's too many people on the Wi-Fi at once in a small area? Like, I would think what they should do is have one line for paper tickets, and it's only one. So if you still have that, it's annoying to you to get through that line. So that encourages you to use a mobile if that's better and that's more, if that's what they want to use for a multiple number of reasons. But to still allow that seems to be the right choice because not everybody is technologically savvy enough for this.
Yeah.
I understand all of that. The idea that what if your phone loses battery? Well, they have a charging station. It's not like those questions didn't exist with what if I lose my paper ticket?
True. It's all there. It's all. I don't know. I guess you're probably saving some paper, probably saving the environment a little bit. But outside of that, are we saving?
Maybe. I don't think any of us are in the studio are as fired up about it as Billy.
I think it's about tracking, actually, because I went to this Global Sports Management Summit, and there was someone from. Now I think it's the Magic. They have this whole online app for the Orlando Magic, and it includes Magic Bucks, trading in your old tickets. If you're a season ticket holder, you're not going to go. You give them back to the team for points, and then you can use those points for merchandise or concessions or upgrades or meeting players. So trying to create this online community, connect with season ticket holders, but it also allows them via the app to have access to where you are, what time you're arriving, how many games you're going to. So by using those tickets, I don't know if there's any way that they hope to transition to the ability to actually gauge who is using the ticket, where they are, what time they're arriving. Like, are they getting more information out of using that than a paper ticket? That would be my guess.
Does seem right in the wheelhouse of Billy and his nuanced complaints. Like, what's the biggest issue here for you, Bill?
Oh, there's so many. How about stop being cheap, okay? I paid the same price for my ticket. How about print it on a piece of paper, waste your own ink, your own
That makes
paper.
you feel fancy? Like, having a paper ticket makes you feel...
Yeah, if something cool happens, I have a ticket stub, and you can be like, hey, look, I was there for this. I was there for that. What am I going to do? I'm going to go through emails and show people on my phone, like, old pictures of this digital copy of a ticket? Ridiculous.
It is true. I hate the printout tickets, but I love the fancy getting them in the mail and like put them in a shadow box, you know, a couple months later tickets. Those are cool.
I had season tickets this year. Well, I have still for the Marlins, and I was like expecting in the mail to come like this whole strip of all these tickets, all these games, and it was so exciting. And it's like print it yourself, and I'm printing myself.
Yeah,
Now
I do think it's not as fun to not have like hard copy tickets, especially when like teams sometimes do cool stuff. A couple years ago, the Cubs had like every ticket looked like an old baseball card of either current or old Cubs players, which was a really cool thing that you wanted to get that box in the mail that had all the strips of your season tickets with those on it.
What else you got, Bill?
No, it's that. I want a cool, fancy-looking ticket. I want a design. And I don't want to have to go buy paper now. I have to buy ink. I have to do all this stuff. I have to download this app, and then the app's not working, and I'm standing there like an idiot trying to show it to the person, and then it doesn't scan right, and then I have to swipe back. Just give me tickets.
Do you have resting annoyed face? Like, is that you? Yeah. Because I saw some pictures on Instagram of you with your girl on some trip, I think a wedding in Dominican Republic or something.
She's cute, Billy.
She snapped the picture of you were just looking at her with the same look that if somebody just told you, hey, you're not getting paper tickets, you've got to print this out yourself, and then bam, there's the face.
It was
she
hot
was
there, yeah.
She was super smiling every photo, and he looked real angry about everything.
Well, thank you, I guess, if there's a
No, but like you're on vacation, and she was like, yay, vacation, and you were like, ugh.
Yeah, I'm not the most pleasant person to be around.
Ever.
No.
Ever. Especially not at Marlins games.
There's always something.
Dan Le Batard.
Never going to stop. I am what I am, man. I'm 44 years old. I ain't changing.
Stugotz.
Why change now? It's worked. Here I am. Sitting next to you. Filthy rich.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
We do go now to the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We'll talk to Dave Zirin of The Nation. Dave, how are you doing? Thanks so much for the time.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we were discussing earlier about Josh Rosen, the UCLA quarterback, and his comments about how football and school do not go together. You first heard or read his thoughts and his comments on the subject and thought what?
I thought that this dovetails with practically every interview I've ever done with a Division I college athlete who plays in a revenue-producing sport. And that's what's been so disturbing about this conversation is that you've heard people who maybe played, water polo in college, speak out about what? I played water polo and I was able to get my econ degree. And, all due respect to water polo. I'm sure it's very demanding. I'm sure there are a ton of practices. I'm sure there are a lot of away games in other people's pools. But you cannot compare the amount of pressure that's put on the 21st century college athlete with any other sport because of how much is resting on these revenues when it comes to the life of the 21st century university. I mean, the system is so profoundly different than it was even 20 years ago that what Rosen said to me was self-evident. And the NCAA has put out their own data about this. People read the data and you see the amount of hours that a typical revenue-producing student athlete puts forward, 32 to 37, and that's just the official hours. Then it becomes the sort of thing where speaking of them as if they're just normal students who happen to play sports, is an absurdity.
It's interesting. J.A. Adonde tweeted out yesterday, side observation from the convo Josh Rosen started. Note who is and isn't allowed to ask for more. You don't hear the they should be happy with what they've got chorus when conferences expand or ask for higher TV rights fees. It's interesting in sports. It's one of the only places where the man that we complain about is the athlete, and we usually take the side of the league or the team or whoever, right? Because we want to watch the sport. We don't want the complaints. I feel like this is a perfect example of someone talking about a system that is flawed and people immediately going to the entitled argument and not being willing to listen to that side of it.
Yeah, not being willing to listen to it, which is that's when you just get the equivalent of a Twitter conversation of people talking past each other and seeing who could get the best burn in instead of actually listening to what's being said. And this is a long thing in sports, of athletes being seen as brands or extensions of equipment and not human beings who might actually have some really pertinent and valid observations about the sports that they play. This has been going on, I think, for as long as there's been sports, but I think it's actually gotten more acute in recent years because of the rise of fantasy sports. I think we have a whole generation of fans in this country who identify with management more than players. Like, I remember growing up in the 1980s, I was a terrible baseball player, but I loved baseball, and I used to dream about developing, like, the perfect knuckleball, which would get me on the Mets. And that was all I thought about. And I really think the equivalent of me today is thinking about their fantasy team. And in that case, a player speaking out, all it does is puncture the fantasy.
Talking to Dave Zirin of The Nation. And Dave, it's funny you mentioned the water polo player. Literally the first tweet I got on this subject after we discussed it was, how about the fact I was a water polo player at Arizona State and practiced more than even of the football players. I don't think of football players as the only ones who practiced a lot. But you obviously mentioned the pressure is entirely different there. But there was a tweet from Danny Cannell, formerly of ESPN, who said he wondered how he would have handled such a question at his age and then put a quote that he had versus Josh Rosen's quote. You retweeted that. Is he not essentially saying the same thing, Danny, just softening it up the way he said it?
Yeah, and that came out of a discussion I had with Danny over Twitter yesterday, which I really did appreciate, and what was a lot of fun to have that back and forth with Danny. And one of the conclusions that we came to, even though we come at this from very different places, is that his experience in 1996 compared to 2017, I mean, if not apples and oranges, I mean, at least we're dealing with maybe clementines and tangerines. Like, it's similar, but it's not. And the real differentiation, what it comes down to, which Danny readily admitted, what was this issue of pressure and how different it is when your coach makes $10 million a year instead of $1 million a year. How different it is when you know that your school, whether or not your school is going to be, in the black or in the red for the coming year, is going to depend on the football team. And this is the part that I think most people really don't get, is that football, college football, is rooted almost entirely in these very small towns in the Midwest and the South. And these small towns used to be industrial centers where people had jobs, and college football was just something that was connected to that. Now, the lifeblood of these communities, whether you're talking about tourism, whether you're talking about police officers picking up extra shifts as security at the stadium, or whether you're talking about the kids who sell the cold bottled water in the coolers as you're going into the stadium, the lifeblood depends on how that college football team does. I remember when Jameis Winston was at Florida State, their success was an extra $1 million a week for the city of Tallahassee. So we're not talking New York City here. We're not talking a distraction or a fun thing. People have such a stake in the success of these teams economically, socially, culturally. Then people would be, I think, ignorant to not think that pressure doesn't sort of fall down the mountain on the shoulders of people 18, 19 years old. And some of that pressure is also rooted in saying to these players, maybe you really need to think about the classes that you take. You can give your full attention to this thing that the entire school and the entire community depends upon.
Talking to Dave Zirin about the comments from UCLA quarterback Jeff Rosen about school and football not really mixing. I can't vet this comment from someone on Twitter, but this is the point we were mentioning before you came on, which is that there aren't really options for people who want to play professional football other than to go to college, which means even if you don't care about academics or aren't equipped to handle academic stress, you have to go through that to get to the end goal. And this guy says, my hometown had a kid who was 1994 5A Texas offensive player of the year in football. He was borderline special ed and couldn't get into any D1 schools, even though he had offers from every school in the country. He now works odd jobs to raise his family. It's a very extreme example, but when you consider the idea that we make people go through the motions of an academic collegiate career in order to get to the end goal, now that's not to say that it ends up benefiting those who don't go on to play professional, that they have something to fall back on. Absolutely, that's the case. But if you're allowing people their own agency and they're not interested in the academic side, they just want to play professional football, they still have to go to college to do that.
Yeah, if I could wave my Harry Potter magic wand, I would have the NFL spend billions of dollars on its own minor league, so people who just want to play football can play football and wouldn't have to go through the charade of a college experience that they neither want nor perhaps think that they need. People should be able to make that choice. But I know that will never happen. But what if you did have a system where every seat that would have been taken by a college football player who doesn't want to be there automatically goes to a scholarship to someone from that kid's school who otherwise would not have been able to afford college? Because let's face it, there are legions of young people who go to underperforming public high schools who are desperate for loans, their churches take collections, they fill the classrooms at community colleges because they want to get a chance at that education. What if that education could actually operate through the athlete, and the athlete in effect becomes the sponsor of a scholarship for a young person from their school or from their community? Of course, if the athlete wants to have that education, they could have that option as well. But let's make sure that people who are in the seats at our universities are people who want to be there and put in the work, because it ends up becoming something that I would argue degrades the entire process of higher education. And that really is why when you go to other countries, I'm guessing you guys have had this experience, and you talk to them about our minor leagues for our football and our basketball are our colleges. I mean, people look at us like, okay, that's one way to do it, I guess. But it's just so weird the way this is developed in this country.
last thing real quickly, Dave, and I love the fact that you're solutions-oriented, not just pointing out the issues and the problems here. But quick change up, just on this Colin Kaepernick issue. There's this discussion that, so many people didn't watch football last year because of his protest. Now you've got thousands of fans that are claiming that they'll boycott the league if he isn't on a roster by the time the season starts. There's that scheduled protest on August 23rd outside of the NFL headquarters. Will Colin not being on a team potentially hurt the NFL / help his cause even more so than when he was kneeling and active in the NFL last year?
It all depends on, I think, what current NFL players do in the wake of him not being on a team. Because I've seen what happened when Craig Hodges and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, for example, were drummed out of the NBA for political reasons, and their names became like a cautionary tale, like agents and managers and family members whispering to players, don't be political because you don't want to end up like Craig Hodges or Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. So the question is, will Colin Kaepernick become a ghost story or will he become a martyr? The answer to that question can only be found in NFL locker rooms, and whether players say, you know what, I'm going to stand up to this and I'm going to make a statement the way Doug Baldwin recently did about what's happening. Because I can see Colin Kaepernick becoming an inspiration for a new generation of players who are saying, I'm not just going to be extensions of equipment. You have to recognize that I'm a human being in this uniform risking my health for your entertainment. Or we're going to have a situation where it's going to have a chilling effect on the league. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Dave, you're the best, man. Thanks so much for the time and the insight.
No, thank you both. I'm such an admirer of both of your work, so it's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Le Batard.
7 o'clock on the dot. I'm in my drop top, cruising the streets. Oh, yeah. I've got a real pretty little thing that's waiting for me.
Oh, it was great. Stugotz.
I pull up, anticipating good love. Don't keep me waiting. I got plans to put my hands in places I've never seen. Girl, you know what I mean.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Ooh, great jam.
Great jam?
Great jam.
Has
Pretty
those
Woman.
words ever been
Pretty
said
Woman.
about this song?
Yeah, great jam.
Nice, a good song. Great jam. So, I was scrolling through Twitter and saw this story that obviously, in a couple of ways, filters into sports some. Headline is, and it's from Reuters, the headline is, marijuana use holds threefold blood pressure death risk, according to a study. It says people who smoke marijuana have a
Associated with college football to publicly state Nick Saban is overrated so the world could tell them how idiotic they truly are.
All right. Nick Saban, overrated, got him heated. What were you seeing there, Mike? What got you going there on Stephen A?
Well, because he said blasphemy beforehand, and he was really fired up that people were saying that Nick Saban was overrated. So
people are saying this now? That's what people are hanging on to? Nick Saban
poll
being
of college
overrated?
football coaches ranks Nick Saban amongst most overrated head coaches, and Stephen A. went off.
Actually, you know what? Jay Adonde, who I think announced today that he's leaving ESPN and concentrating on his work at Northwestern University. That's one of my favorite things about him was whenever you're hanging out or you're getting ready to do a show, he'll always just drop you know what's overrated or you know what's underrated, and he'll just go off on something. And I always laugh every time he drops that. But apparently Nick Saban is now on that list. But
it's temerity, the unmitigated goal.
So get into this story real quick. People who smoke marijuana have a 3 times greater risk of dying from hypertension or high blood pressure than those who have never used the drug, scientists said on Wednesday. The risk grows with every year of use, they said. The findings from a study of some 1,200 people could have implications in the U.S., among other countries. Several states have legalized marijuana, and others are moving toward it. It's decriminalized in a number of other countries. It's interesting in a couple of ways. Obviously, with the NFL looking to soften it, and everybody in sort of I guess the liberal side, left-leaning side, will say, "Oh, it only has positive uses, etc." And we've sort of maybe ignore the negatives. If this is real, it's going to create some issues there. right?
Certainly. Business Insider says of the story that the findings sound alarming, but it's important to keep in mind that, like any study, it has limitations, including that it defines marijuana users as anyone who's ever tried the drug, and that it doesn't differentiate among strains of a highly unregulated product, which is very true. But it goes on to say, of course, that it is useful for us to understand how cannabis might affect the heart, and that there is certainly room for a lot more studies on that.
I also wonder, and I have to look it up because I'm pretty sure it's true, like, doesn't alcohol lead to a lot more deaths or heart-related deaths and injuries and stuff?
Oh, I mean, yeah. Alcohol is proven in so many ways to be, you can always find a study that'll tell you a glass of red wine each day is good for you, and then people post it on their Facebook, pour me some more. But there's, of course, also actual studies about the many, many ways it can be damaging. People often use that comparison of alcohol to marijuana in terms of trying to say why one would be legal and the other isn't, particularly when it comes to driving under the influence, the number of deaths due to alcohol-related diseases, etc. But you're right that this is certainly, we don't have a lot of conversations, I think, in the middle between the people who say that marijuana is highly addictive and incredibly dangerous, and then people who say it's great and it's good for you in any number of ways. We don't have a lot or enough, I think, conversation that's about the middle ground, that there are, of course, issues involved, especially if you're smoking versus using edibles or something that doesn't involve smoke, that there's a middle ground there to have conversations and to do more studies.
Yeah, and again, this is just a little sidetrack here, but Zach Randolph today arrested on felony charge of marijuana possession with intent to sell by the L.A. County Sheriff's Department Wednesday night. You had more on this?
Oh, I would like to, maybe coming around the next break after that, we'll listen to Stephen A. going off on him. It is an interesting conundrum to be caught in. When you have as much money and success as he has, why are you doing this? What's the motivation?
That's a great question. And I think, I don't think it's so much the motivation. Like, I don't think he's sitting there trying to, hey, I'm going to go sell some weed. It's more, hey, I've probably been around this drug, for the entirety of my career. I've still been able to have this career, and it hasn't really hurt me that much.
So why sell it, though?
That part, we just have to know the details on that. Like, I don't know if he's actually trying to sell it. I don't know if it's guys around him trying to sell it, or maybe he just took the hit for it. But, hey, see what I did there? Took the hit for it.
It's weed.
Hi, everyone. Stugotz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you are confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you the same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you are getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz. That's rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz, STUGOTZ. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states. NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
The Citi Double Cash Card presents Tips for Talking Sports at the Office. Number 8, be informed.
I'm going to list some random stats that don't really mean anything.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. I'm nodding, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's not working.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone said what they meant? The Citi Double Cash Card does. It lets you earn double cash back with 1% when you buy and 1% as you pay. The Citi Double Cash Card. Double means double.
Dan Le Batard.
I mean, my kids don't even like me anymore. That's the bad part. I mean, the one thing I had was my kids, was my twin girls, and they are mortified by me, by my mere existence.
Stugotz.
I mean, I went in that lake at camp over the weekend, took the shirt off, stuck the stomach out as far as I could, and cannonballed right into that lake. My girls asked me to leave afterwards.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And now your SportsCenter update. Saints running back Adrian Peterson, that still sounds weird, will not see action against the Browns on Thursday night, per source. Along with Peterson, the Saints will also not have Drew Brees and Mark Ingram in the lineup Thursday. A U.S. District Court judge in Mississippi on Wednesday dismissed former Ole Miss football coach Houston Nutt's civil lawsuit against the university and its board of trustees after both sides agreed the court didn't have jurisdiction to decide the matter. When your big day or special event rolls around this summer, look just as great as you feel in rental suits from theblacktux.com. The Black Tux is your new way to rent. To get free shipping plus $20 off your purchase, visit theblacktux.com/Dan. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and say that Houston Nutt's lawsuit did its damage already, right? Didn't need to actually finish off.
Sure did. Well, and the fact that he has said before and now after the release of all this information, all I really wanted was a public apology and an acknowledgement that I am not the cause of all of this problem. And it got way uglier than it needed to.
Yep. We were speaking earlier about Zach Randolph's arrest on a felony charge of marijuana possession with the intent to sell in Los Angeles Wednesday night.
Let me point out really quickly that everybody on my Twitter has informed me, I did not know, that intent to sell is not intentional. It is not like based on actual intent. It's based on how much weed you have.
Yes, it's just having it.
So that
nobody
explains,
could smoke that much. You must be selling.
Right. That explains why we don't necessarily need to believe that he was selling, which is what my question was. Why, if you have as much money and success as he had, why would you need to sell weed? But I guess it was just the amount that he had.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes you wonder why you carry around that much to begin with or what have you. But, that was a good clarification there. But also, there was some great sound on this from Stephen A. Smith, and we're going to give it to you in two parts. Here was the first part of Stephen A. discussing the Zach Randolph arrest.
To consider the workmanlike individual that he has been, how good he has been for the teams that he has played for, considering the absence of athletic ability where he uses his girth and his skill to be as effective as he has been in his career, the hard worker that he is, to find himself in this situation because evidently he could not stay off the weed. I'm disgusted with it, to be quite honest with you, and I'm ashamed that he found himself in this situation, and now he's got to deal with this blemish. It's on him.
Love how he references that, just like he referenced Lamar Odom. He was on crack, and then the weed. Here's the rest of what Stephen A. had to say on the subject.
I'm shocked, first of all. I'm a fan of Zach Randolph. I like him a lot. I'm shocked at the stupidity of him finding himself in this situation. But this is an individual that has made well over $150 million in his career. I find it very, very difficult to believe that he was intending to sell. Now, according to the report that I read just on the newswire, I think it was from TMZ or wherever else it was, it said specifically the reason why the words intent to sell were thrown into the equation as it pertained to the arrest is because of the amount of weed that he was in possession of. So essentially, due to the amount, they say, okay, intent to sell. That doesn't mean he was intending to sell it. It might have meant he was intending to use it all. It might have meant that he was intending to use a lot of it, and there were others with him who he had it in his possession, and they were going to use it as well. But in the end, it's inexcusable that he found himself in this position. Sometimes you got to monitor the company you keep. Sometimes you got to have people looking out for you to know better than allowing you to put yourself in that situation. But at the end of the day, he is a grown man. He knows better.
That's your sound of the day, brought to you by Dollar Shave Club. Upgrade to shaving with a fresh blade whenever you want for a fraction of the price. Join dollarshaveclub.com today. I love the whooshing in between, which is when they're updating what's coming up next on the screen on First Take. But Sarah, it feels like to me, a guy who just got a little too comfortable. Weed is there's softening thoughts on it, stances on it, and everything else, and he was just out with his friends and had way too much on him, and now is probably in big trouble.
Right. I think there's also this conundrum of the idea that you get too big for where you came from. And I don't know exactly where Zach Randolph was born. I'd have to look that up. But the idea that you no longer associate with certain kinds of people when you get too big for them, that's problematic. But then also this argument of when you found your way out of bad situations, why would you go back seeking them? He was at a housing project in Watts. And a group of people started gathering in the area. The police showed up, and when the officers responded, a mob formed and began to destroy police cruisers, throwing objects at officers, prompting them to call for backup. And that's when he was taken into custody. So, again, that's the reporting that we're getting now. There's no way of knowing whether, when the police arrived, there was nothing that seemed illegal being done, and yet they still busted it up and caused commotion. Who knows how the, kind of interaction began between these people and the police. But the question is, I guess, why is he there with this incredibly large amount of drugs? It's a very different situation than, say, sitting in your home and enjoying some marijuana, if that's what you're into, right? Which I think is part of what Stephen A. is saying is the disappointment in putting himself in this situation.
Yeah, and I guess there's a disappointment there, but it's not as if Zach has ever, he's never changed who he is. He's never really, adjusted to what we all expect, our professional athletes to act like. And so he's kept it real, if you will. And this is him, when keeping it real goes wrong. And I do think, like I said, it just feels like he got a little too casual with it and was probably going to regret that, or probably does regret that right now. I don't think it's something where he just, is this bad guy or is just being this defiant and everything else. It just feels like he got too comfortable and just got in a bad position, and now it's just, I don't know how this is going to end here. But,
New York Post has some new information. They just posted this about 10 minutes ago, that there was a group of people blocking the street, drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana near the housing projects. Police were on routine patrol. They had to call for backup because suspects that were detained caused people to get raucous. There was another man, an ex-convict in the group, reportedly arrested for possession of a firearm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess getting too comfortable is a nice euphemism for it, but when you have so much to lose, you put yourself in a really bad position there.
What else does he really have to lose, though? At this point, if Zach Randolph does not play another basketball game, does not get paid another dime for playing in the NBA, he's won.
Okay, but you're... No,
I'm just asking you in terms of what his mentality is.
Okay, well, Izzy, if you lost your job tomorrow and you have the money and the success that you've already had, people would say you might have won, but is that what you want? Do you want to be done tomorrow?
I'm not saying that's what he wanted. I'm saying, could that have possibly gotten into the mentality of, I don't have to worry about this because I'm good? And it's different with Zach Randolph than me because there's more zeros involved.
Right, but he just signed a two-year, $24 million deal with the Kings in July.
Because he can.
What do you mean because he can?
Because he can and he wants to. He can still play and he still wants to play. But again, I'm just curious, do you think that in his, whether consciously he say, or subconsciously just kind of decides that, whatever happens to me from here on out, I'm good and I'm just going to live my life the way I want to live it? You don't think that's sort of basically what's crossing his mind here?
I guess I don't think either of us knows. That's a lot to put into his head versus just saying that he made a bad decision or perhaps thought he was above the law and that he wouldn't get caught.
I just wonder if a lot of people wouldn't think that way if they were in position. Not saying I'm trying to read Zach Randolph's mind here. I'm just wondering, again, because you hear people say this all the time. Oh, the money will soften their blow. Oh, it's not that big of a deal for these athletes. They're rich, they're rich, they're rich. This could be one of those situations where you look at people would say, if I was Zach Randolph, I wouldn't care that much, and I'd be okay if.
But your career is so short. Not saying your career is so short. To say that he knowingly was this is a risk I'm willing to take. I don't really care if I'm done. When he only has maybe this contract, maybe one more after that, and then has the entire rest of his life to try to live off this money and then figure out what's the next step. I just think that's a very simplistic way of looking at this.
Agreed. I'm not saying he out there consciously said that. I'm just saying in terms of part of what allows you to get in that position. When Stephen A. says, I'm disappointed in him putting himself in that position, part of whether, again, subconscious or conscious thinking here is, I don't have much to lose except, this is the way my career could end, but I don't have much to lose because, hey, it's heading toward the end anyway, and I've made millions and millions, and I'm good.
I mean, could you go to jail for the amount that he had?
Probably.
That's something to be lost, your freedom?
Okay. Again, just something thrown out there. Here's why cops choose Blink home security to protect their homes and families. Blinks are
great
small
transition.
Video cams.
Here's why cops, like the ones that arrested Zach Randolph.
Don Le Batard.
Limited fake Tim Kirkchen. What do the Royals have to do to make the playoffs?
Stugotz.
Dan, the Royals are really good.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Sarah, don't listen to all those people who are giving you a hard time for not knowing laws about marijuana.
That person, I'm like I literally just wrote back. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm so busy trying to stick to sports that I don't know marijuana laws. Get out of here. I swear to God, this happened to me the last time. I think it was maybe like a trifecta. There was some like in-depth conversation about some kind of drugs that I don't know about because I don't do drugs. And then everyone was like, what do you should know this if you're going to be on the air. I'm like, I'm supposed to know everything about everything in life, including specificity of some kind of PCP or something. I don't know.
It's also tough when it happens while you're on the air.
Yeah, like I didn't do any prep for the Zach Randolph segment. I'm so sorry that I don't have a natural knowledge of marijuana charges.
We'll do some homework. We'll go try to sell some, during the next 20 hours or so and come back tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to take a couple giant bags worth and see what happens.
So, yesterday there was a lot of discussion about, because it's, what are we, mid-August yet? Early August? Because it's mid-August and there's not a whole lot going on. Discussion about the improvements, if you will, to the NBA schedule. They eliminated stretches of 4 games in 5 days altogether. They reduced back-to-backs to the lowest there's ever been. They reduced single-game road trips by 17%, which is an interesting one. A lot of people don't recognize. You go, 1,500 miles one day, play a game, come back the next day. It seems like one short road trip, but it's as exhausting as some of the other ones because you're traveling so much. And, Sarah, what would you say was sort of the overwhelming opinion on this when it comes to whether players are not going to rest as much anymore during games and just the overall feel to how it was received by fans, media, etc.?
It was interesting to hear Stephen A. Smith on Mike and Mike say that this was a calculated effort by the players to get this done, that they were intentionally missing the big TV games, the ABC, TNT games, to prove a point to the NBA, which has been responded to in kind by this change to the rules. If that is the case, which I have no reason to doubt Stephen A's reporting, then they certainly have taken control back in even larger ways than we've articulated. Obviously we've been discussing how they've had more agency in where they go as free agents and putting together teams. Now it feels as though they're pushing back on amount of work and scheduling as well. I don't know how much this is going to drastically change rest. I think teams are always going to try to get a leg up on other guys and other players by resting a bit. So if they're going to play every game, we're going to play a little bit less than that. But I do think when it comes to the big TV games, which is the real money-making stuff that's affecting the NBA the most, it might make a difference.
It's a good take. It's not what I asked you. What did you think was the reaction to this? Like, which way did you think that was sort of the more popular look at this? Is it going to help? Is it not going to help? Is it all for naught or all for nothing?
So you don't want my take? You want my take on other takes?
No. Well, that's the question I'm asking right now. Not your take on other takes, just what you think it was. Like, what was the temperature
my assessment of other takes?
Yes.
Okay. My assessment of other takes based on the limited time I spent taking in other takes on Around the Horn and Twitter is that it seems fairly split. Some people seem to think that this will, no one believes that it's going to completely solve the problem. I think there are those who think, as I do, that certain major issues will be affected at least minimally, including the big TV games. And then there are those who seem to think that it's not going to have any effect, that they will just continue then resting in proportion to whatever the game schedule is.
Yeah, I would say that's about right. That's the same way I sort of took these things in yesterday. I think I might have been a little harsh, and this is partially why I kind of hate this time of year, because we take a subject that we probably wouldn't spend but a couple seconds on at other times and really just come up with some contrived conversation. But I might have been a little harsh talking about, the league is clearly just looking at the money in this situation because they're just trying to get eyeballs on the big TV games, and they're not really worried about the home fans, et cetera, et cetera. I actually think, and had a little bit of a deeper discussion on this yesterday after work, and I think it's actually a pretty bold move by the league, I would say. It's doing everything they can to keep their players healthy when they complain about these things, when we've had a lot of studies into it, doing actually something different. And I know they've done a lot, but they've done some, and it seems like they're just sort of catering to the players, et cetera. But if indeed this is, a real response to studies, to medicine, to players' complaints and not really complaints, but the players' concerns, I think it's a huge step. I think it's a big deal for them to do that. Now, clearly there is a money element here where if you're not willing to back off on the number of games because there's that much money to be had, then it is your top priority, right? More so than players' health, et cetera. But nobody's going to argue that that's not the case in every other sport. So not really to dog the league on that. But and the other thing that we talked about, Sarah, is this is something that we feel like the players are going to decide because they have all this power. LeBron James is going to decide when he sits. But really, it's the teams that kind of come to these conclusions. And this is the league working with the teams to try to figure out, hey, how does Greg Popovich not have to make the choice whether to sit Kawhi or not? How can we take it out of Ty Lue's hands whether or not to play LeBron, make it obvious he's going to play LeBron because the schedule allows it? So I think that part was probably overstated as well by some people who just said, it might not work. The players will rest whenever they want to, and I was guilty of that too. But I do think the best way and the only way to measure whether this is going to help at all is to go through the season without the rest, right? Have the teams and the players concede and say, look, fine, we got enough days off. Not going to take a rest day just randomly. I'm going to have to be hurt to rest. We're going to have to measure the performances this year. We're going to have to measure everything that we've been measuring so far, whether it be SportsView or what have you, and find out if guys are literally playing faster, playing harder, running more during games, resulting in a sharper product. Because if that's not the case, then it doesn't really improve anything. Because if we're talking about player health and player performance, well, yeah, it's got to show once they have more rest or once we expand the regular season to give them more days off. Otherwise, I don't really see the purpose of it.
Well, it was interesting to hear Adam Silver talk about how we've discussed the science of this in a way that it makes it perceived to be done or complete, and that in his research and in his talking to people, the science is far from complete on understanding. Because if you remember specifically some of the rest that occurred last year, particularly I think it was the Spurs-Warriors game, came down to studies that had been done on back-to-backs with one of them away games with this amount of, blah, blah, blah. And Adam Silver seemed to imply that there was not as much science that had been done as perhaps we were being led to believe. I think your point is a valid one, except for we don't really know. We won't know if people are resting because of real injuries or if they're taking that rest day and then just listing it as because of some sort of injury. So at the end of the season, we can certainly look back, and if the rest days are down this year from last year, we can then compare the two. But there's so many factors then that we can't control for, which could be injury-based or whatever. So it's really hard to actually figure out how often the complaints about the back-to-backs or the schedules resulting in change of play are realistic, and how much of that is just a decision on the part of some players and teams to give themselves a leg up compared to others in terms of being fresh when it comes to the end of the season.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of give the league some credit here for, I've heard Dan say there's nothing you can do about it when it comes to the rest. And the league could probably shrug its shoulders and say, yeah, there is nothing we can do about it. We're going to try. And hopefully we can come to some sort of, conclusion that allows both sides to be happy and frankly the fans to be happy as well. because not only do they get to see a really good product, but they get to see the players that they want to see in their home games or even in the road games, depending on where you are. So I think it's more to look into than just sort of the initial reactions we had yesterday.
Well, and by them making any move at all, they can certainly throw that back at the players and say, we've made concessions, we've tried to help you, you need to take a step towards us.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Silver's always going to have that in his back pocket because he does make a lot of concessions/decisions based on the LeBron Jameses and the bigger names and their complaints and their concerns, etc. On the other side, Sarah, I want to play a piece of sound that I know you're going to love, and I think it's going to help me win an argument that we had a long time ago. So we'll hear that sound next. It's Izzy Gutierrez and Sarah Spain filling in for Dan Le Batard and Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Dan Le Batard.
You are the best, and when I say the best, I mean the very worst and most evil.
Stugotz.
The worst.
But this time, it's for real.
Worst.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Yeah, let's get the whole Pretty Woman catalog out today.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And now your SportsCenter update. Saints running back Adrian Peterson will not see action against the Browns on Thursday night, per source. Along with Peterson, the Saints will also not have Drew Brees and Mark Ingram in the lineup Thursday. A U.S. District Court judge in Mississippi on Wednesday dismissed former Ole Miss football coach Houston Nutt's civil lawsuit against the university and its board of trustees after both sides agreed the court didn't have jurisdiction to decide the matter. This SportsCenter is brought to you by JCPenney. Guys, get to JCPenney and save big on a select items throughout the store. Find great brands like Levi's 502, regular fit jeans for $39.99, or get 25% off select styles of Nike tees, shorts, shoes, and backpack.
Oh boy,
that's getting your penny's worth. JCPenney for all the latest headlines and information. Tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. Not my fault, Sarah. There was a typo in here.
Okay, Stu.
That's the second one of the day. The second one of the day.
Come on.
The second one of the day. You want me to go
If I were there in person, I would
word?
grab that piece of paper out of your hand and prove that, much like Stugotz, you're full of it.
Well, if we don't, okay, well, I will tweet it out then. I will grab this paper out of the trash. I didn't want to say anything, Roy. Didn't want to say anything, but Sarah kept piling on, so I had to tell the truth.
That copy came straight from the billboard sheet that was sent to me by ESPN.
Now you're deflecting.
Oh,
I'm not.
It's your job.
Is it the bald guy in sales? Who is it? Who sent you that report?
The bald guy in sales.
That's what I thought.
Save big on A select items. That does not sound right. That's how it's written.
That happens often, and it's Roy's job to make sure things like that don't fall through the cracks. Ultimately,
God, Roy.
Roy, it's your fault. Decided.
See, Sarah. See what happens when you make fun of me. You could cost somebody his job. So about that sound that I wanted to play. It comes from VH1. Mike, can you remind me the name of the show? I don't remember the name of the show.
Baller Wives.
Baller Wives. It comes from Baller Wives on VH1. And it involves a certain former NFL quarterback, Michael Vick. Remember this conversation we were having, Sarah, when Michael Vick said what he said about Colin Kaepernick, and we all sort of focused in on his comments saying the hair, right? The hair's the problem. He needs to cut his hair and maybe look more presentable, if you will. Not his words, but in order to get a job. Well, one of the things I said to you, Sarah, was I just get kind of tired of revisiting subjects that we've already had discussions about and hammering home certain points that really we should hammer home anyway, regardless of whether somebody says something dumb. It just drives me nuts when some former athlete says something dumb and we all just kind of we give him all this credit for having thought this through and now creating this. No, I didn't think he had thought anything through. I thought Michael Vick just kind of said something flippant and didn't realize what he was getting himself into. Well, here's Michael Vick and his wife having a discussion about said topic on the show Baller Wives on VH1.
Yo, what's good? You all right?
No, I'm sitting here getting attacked on social media.
Who you?
What do you have going on here in life right now? What was these statements that you made?
Oh, what I said the other day about Cap?
Yes. Why does he have to change his hair for him to get a job? What would make you say get a haircut anyway?
I don't know, Cap. I was wrong. No, man, Kiara was upset. She's saying what everybody else was saying in my own household, so wifey coming at me, that's tough. And that's when I know I really screwed up. You know what, Kiara? I shouldn't have said what I said. No one in any race should be stereotyped based on the way they look, dress, act. But it's the reality of the world we live in.
Yes, but that doesn't make it right. And I know you know that it doesn't make it right.
I know I was wrong with what I said and the way it came out.
It's just not no fun having you know, in the media again for negative things.
Yeah.
It just scares me. It makes me relive a part of our life that I just like to put in the past.
Yes, babe. It's all about changing people.
You know what you're going to be banned from?
Sometimes a loss is a lesson.
You know what you're going to be banned from this week?
What?
Banned from the booty.
Who cares?
You care about the booty.
I care.
I know you care about the booty.
Okay, first of all, my response to that is, wow, that's definitely not staged at all, nor was that scripted when he went on that, eloquently said couple sentences about how everybody should be respected for who they are, blah, blah, blah.
Whoa. That was set, like, if you didn't see it visually, like, it's the way those reality shows go. You get the normal interaction, and then you get, like, an interview.
Yes, you get the confessional. Yes, right. Yes. Okay. Izzy, we are talking about two different things when we talk about this, and we have been since the beginning. I agree with you that we do not need Michael Vick to give us a news peg in order to have a conversation about things that we should already talk about. That we agree on. But when you say that Colin Kaepernick doesn't know what he's saying when he says what he did, it's fine if you'd believe that it was
Michael
not
Vick didn't know what he said.
Yeah, that Michael Vick, that if he wasn't premeditated in deciding to make a political point, to traffic in respectability politics, if you believe that was not his intent, I agree with you yet again. My point was, as an African American man who has lived past the age of 30 plus, who played in the NFL, he knows what an afro means. He understands respectability politics. He understands that an afro and a haircut represent something different than just hair. So when he makes the statements that he does, it is not coming from a place of ignorance. And so even if his intent is not to stir things up and not to get into this thing, and he wasn't really thinking it through when he said it, he still comes from a place of experience. So to remove that element from it and to simply pass it off as him throwing off some idiotic statement that he didn't think through, I think is really to undermine his own experiences as a black quarterback in a white-led league. Like, he knew what he was saying.
I'm not suggesting, never was I suggesting that his ignorance comes from a lack of experience or a lack of knowledge in the racial element of it. What I am saying was he was not ready for the media backlash. The ignorance, of course not.
No one ever disagreed with that.
Comes from not knowing what the reaction was going to be, and therefore the reaction was so great that we have to have this great discussion about it, and everybody's going back to back Colin and everything else, and I get all that. And that's what I'm saying about this. He didn't really think it through. But, all I wanted to get out there was that he was banned from the booty.
I do like that line. I do like the idea of being banned from the booty. And
There's
I like how he said, who cares? And then she's like, you care? He's like, actually, I do care, yes.
That's the flippant reaction that he shouldn't have had there either.
Care a lot about the booty.
In his head, he's like, wait a second, what? Did I just say who cares? That's the only booty I'm supposed to care about. I can't be banned from it.
Right. Clearly, I'm getting no other booty, so if I don't have that booty, I will have none.
There was another a segment of that I think got clipped off, where they're sort of introducing each other, and I think she says something to the effect of, yeah, I married my baby daddy, or something like that. And it just sounds like what? Did you marry, like, the love of your life? You just married your baby daddy? Oh, okay, I get it now. It's just, I don't watch those shows, but I feel like I should, because
there's one in Miami I just saw.
Wags.
It's like Wags of Miami or something.
Yeah, Wags.
I don't need to see Michael Vick and his wife, like, hang out. I want him to go away forever.
Banned from the booty.
Who cares?
You care about the booty.
I care.
I know you care about the booty.
You see how quick he went from who cares to I care?
I changed my mind.
Dan Le Batard.
Blink 192.
Stugotz.
Miko.
That's a fine.
Oh, Blink 182. Ah, bleep it. Do I get fined for that?
Yes, you do.
Yes, you get fined.
I thought they were names of people, not
just
bands.
Names in general. I mean, come on,
Blink
man.
192.
I know. I made it 192. That's funny.
You put this in place, man. You know what? I still owe $1 from
No, but wait a minute.
No,
from last week.
Hold on.
That should be more than $1, Dan.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
It's definitely going to bring up another Lala conversation real quick. But so I tweeted out the little typo, little misprint there. I feel bad for Roy, so to make you feel a little better about it, I did see this, and it's probably somebody that got in a little bit of trouble here. This was yesterday, I believe, or 2 days ago. I saw this on some Twitter feed that just points out all of ESPN's mistakes, and it was a Bengals update that said one of their tight ends Uzoma got carted off the field and will undergo testes to determine severity.
Oh, no. Yeah. Nobody wants to undergo testes.
No. And so...
All right. Keep your mind out of the gutter, Izzy.
I did want to read this tweet here. Says, don't listen to Michael Ryan Ruiz. He enjoys Liam Gallagher. That dude is trash. DJ Snake put on a hell of a show. Do you, Izzy?
By the way, Liam Gallagher, that was crazy. Did he, how much of a set did he do before he stormed off?
Four songs.
That's crazy. Do you think he gets fined for that, or?
I'm not sure how that works out. There's no way he gets paid in full. About an hour later, someone, maybe him, sent out a tweet saying that he had a gig the night before, which is true. He played at Park West in Chicago that really bleeped up his voice. An explanation would have been nice, though.
You don't just storm off after 4 songs.
Here's what stinks is that... Here's what I think happened.
Yeah.
Someone was holding up a sign that said, I love you, Noel.
But you really think that that's enough for him at this point?
Oh, yeah.
I saw
he's been through so much stuff. He's been through so much with that. You would not think that would... That's like my long time ago story about Allen Iverson flipping me off when I was, trolling... what's-his-face? Stackhouse. At that point, I was like, why would you even care? How many people have yelled at you in your life? Why would he care about that?
Man, Liam, that's a trigger for him.
Right?
People know exactly what that means.
And when
he walked off the stage, the crowd was chanting Noel's name.
Wow.
They know how to get under his skin.
Which night was that?
That was the first day.
That's what I was going to say. What sucked about it was, there was other performers that couldn't perform because of the lightning and really wanted to, and he was perfectly fine completing his set and just left because he didn't feel like finishing.
On its own, I would have been happy with it because it's a memorable Liam Gallagher performance. I'd rather that happen than sit through 60 minutes and then not hear Wonderwall,
Right.
So I got a memorable Liam Gallagher story, and it allowed us the opportunity to walk across Grant Park, which is huge and massive.
Yeah.
And catch the Migos set, a set in which they were 45 minutes late to, and I didn't get to catch.
Man.
But I was like, all right, don't worry. Tonight we're going to be able to split Muse and Lorde, and it'll be a great headliner night, and we got evacuated after 3 headlining.
So I got there late, maybe 7 on Thursday, so only had 3 hours of Lala. Was there for Porter Robinson, which was amazing with the rain, everything. The whole setting was awesome. I was like,
I like
this
Porter.
is great.
That's good tiki team.
That's good tiki. He's a little more mellow. It's a little bit more... there's a lot of organ involved. He's really
live mixing at least. It's not just somebody playing an iPod.
Some of these guys have some live mixing involved.
This year was better weather-wise. Other than that first night and if that's if you were going because you love Muse or Lorde or whatever, that stinks. But other than that, in previous years, it's either been 108 and or it's been so much rain that it's mud everywhere. More nights canceled, so it wasn't as bad. It's always something.
I've been to every Lollapalooza since 2009. This was the weirdest weather I've ever had because we've been evacuated several times before, but never for a headliner, which was a real bummer.
Yeah, that
And then
stinks.
the following day was 58 degrees.
Yes. Yeah, that was really weird. But that was good for Izzy because he wanted to wear his onesie, and everybody knows that August is not usually onesie weather in Chicago. So
didn't know we were doing that till that morning, and so I was on board because I had it
because you packed it.
Yeah,
of course.
Why wouldn't I?
Onesie, don't leave home without it.
But that, to me, that's all part of the experience. That rain out and that running out when, after the concert was done and everything, being freezing cold while it's coming down. I thought that was great. That was my first headliner or, first night of headliner at Lolla, and I thought that was a great part of the experience, which makes me wonder, Mike, do you have a checklist, a mental checklist of things that say, okay, this is what makes a great show or a great set or what have you? What do you sort of go down the list and figure out?
I'm sort of desensitized and jaded a little bit when it comes to performances because I've seen a lot of them. I enjoy them still. It's not like I go to a performance and say this is trash, but I'm more likely to do so if something's indeed trash. But if I went into Muse with low expectations because even though I love them as a live band, their last few releases kind of stunk. Mm-hmm. But then they played those 3 songs and Hysteria came on and the rain was going out of this world. There was lightning everywhere, and the energy was so crazy. I like it when someone draws me out of that. Arcade Fire sort of did the same thing. Crystal Castles did the same thing, where I'm going there, and I'm not just going through the motions. I leave my body for a moment. That sounds super cheesy.
No, I understand it.
Did you see the Arcade Fire performance on The Late Show with Colbert?
I did not.
So the whole bit, of course, the song is called Everything Now. The whole bit was Stephen Colbert introduces it. You know, we have a sponsor for our musical performance for the first time ever. It's a company called Everything Now. They do every product of every kind and get it to you immediately. Like, you won't really notice the sponsorship being a part of it. It's obviously a bit. You're like paying attention. And then they do the song, and they're all wearing like costumes as if they're employees of this company, this fake company, Everything Now. And then they do an ad, like they do a fake ad for it. It's basically talking about how the way our world works now with the Amazons and the drone deliveries, that you can have everything immediately, but doesn't make everything good or right or worthwhile.
Yeah, that's their whole social commentary with it.
Yeah.
I believe they're selling a $100 spinner online.
Exactly. They're talking about how it's
$100 fidget spinner?
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, you should go back and I bet you can watch it online. It was really interesting how they did that social statement without like you didn't find it like over the top and annoying. It was thoughtful and it was well done. It was interesting.
So the winter's coming, Sarah. Next time I'm in Chicago, onesie night?
Ooh, onesie night. I don't have one. I got to get one.
Come on, you got plenty of time. I won't be there for a while.
All right, I'm on it.
Onesie night with me and Sarah. Woo!
Hi, everyone. Stugotz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you are confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you the same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you are getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz. That's rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz, STUGOTZ. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states. NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.